Where did the bastards go? A history of famous illegitimate children. We assume that illegitimate children in ancient times faced terrible persecution. Yet, in ancient Greece and Rome, society viewed such children with relative calm acceptance. But then the medieval world arrived and everything changed with brutal suddenness, humiliation, contempt, revulsion. Bastards became walking sins in human form. They were denied chances at decent education, meaningful work. People felt embarrassed to speak with them publicly. They seemed somehow incomplete as human beings. In England, bastards were called unnatural children for centuries. In France, Napoleon himself signed a law declaring illegitimate children to be orphans. How did bastards survive when all of society stood against them? How did they fight and overcome this mark of shame? In this exploration, we'll journey through the fates of bastards from different eras, understanding what bound them together, what set them apart, where this very concept originated, and most importantly, why we suddenly stopped caring whether a child was born in wedlock or not. Picture medieval paintings depicting children. You can't immediately tell whether you're looking at a schoolboy or an adult dwarf. In the Middle Ages, a 13-year-old boy was already considered a man. Yet parents still loved their children with that fierce, unconditional love that defies nature itself. So what was different? By today's standards, medieval child mortality was simply horrifying. Your child had a 25% chance of dying in their first year of life. Between ages 1 and 4, another 12.5% would perish. Up to age 9, 6% more children would vanish. In such conditions, deep parental attachment developed with difficulty. Parents didn't want to dwell on it, pushed away the thought, but understood that their child had a high probability of simply not reaching age 10. It was easier to birth a new one, especially since contraceptives provoked sharp rejection from the church and certainly weren't available in today's quantities. Don't think those who survived had no childhood at all. They still ran through courtyards, played with homemade toys, shouted, laughed, made faces. But if you happened to be born in medieval times, by age 4, you were obligated to help around the house. In agricultural societies, you helped not only at home, but in the fields. A wooden sword was all well and good. But what about real shovels? Look closely at medieval paintings, and you'll notice many children wore not specially tailored children's clothing, but adult garments in smaller sizes. Beyond simple poverty, there's another explanation for this visual style. Adult life didn't begin with a graduation ceremony or a principal's farewell. It started at 12. Yet we shouldn't paint medieval people as complete monsters. Legal codes show that even then, people distinguished between children and adults. Criminal responsibility began at 10 years old. If you stole your neighbor's goose at age 8, you had a chance of escaping punishment. City children could move to their employer's house at 11 and work 12 hours daily. But oaths could only be sworn at 12. Historians claiming the Middle Ages had no childhood forget one crucial detail. Medieval chroniclers simply didn't bother describing children's lives, perhaps because it interested no one, or perhaps because they didn't consider them full human beings. We can't exclude that possibility either. Even judging by portrait painting of the time, children appeared far less frequently than merchants, princes, or warriors. One thing we understand clearly: life for medieval children, like their parents, was extraordinarily difficult. But even by their standards, bastards, those few fortunate enough to survive, had it infinitely harder. William the Conqueror. You've probably heard of him from your English teacher at school. His rapid, successful career inspired envy for generations. At 15, he became a knight. At 30, he united Normandy. At 38, he conquered England and became monarch. Clearly, in the 11th century, people didn't waste time on midlife crises or imposter syndrome. It seems like a typical success story of that era. But there's one small detail. Originally, there was no William the Conqueror. There was William the Bastard. His father, Robert I, was a man of passionate appetites, earning the nickname Robert the Devil. He had a habit of kidnapping virgins and even married women and raping them. Between his villainous acts, Robert fell in love with a tanner's daughter. The relationship was brief, and soon Robert, with clear conscience, released his ladylove. The tanner's daughter bore a son they named William. We know very little about William's childhood, but what we do know can only be called hell on earth. He was surrounded by constant feudal wars and conspiracies. His father refused to acknowledge him until the very end, only doing so when departing on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. 7-year-old William was left in the care of local nobility. Robert had no other sons, so William became heir by default. Robert himself died on the road to the Holy Land under mysterious circumstances. Some historians believe he was poisoned. The bastard's mark haunted William his entire life, but what happened to him in childhood, he remembered forever. Local barons openly despised the bastard who was meant to rule Normandy. They considered William a dirty child, and taking advantage of his father's absence, killed his guardians one by one. William tried to hide, eventually taking refuge among the poor, far from the castle where assassins might find him. Few considered a 7-year-old child a legitimate ruler. Enemies sneered, "Look at him. What can he become except a whipping boy?" A miracle saved this bastard from execution, and this miracle had very specific names. A small group of feudal lords led by the Archbishop of Rouen. These were men of honor who, after Robert's death, agreed among themselves to do everything to save his illegitimate son. As William matured, he justified the chance given by those who saved him. His natural gift helped. He proved himself a brilliant military tactician. At 18, William crushed the army of rebellious barons at Valais-Dune. This helped him secure the throne and become sole ruler of Normandy. His entire successful military career had to prove that even a bastard could be a genius commander. However, his enemies continued mocking William's origins. Once, they forced local residents to scatter pieces of leather along the road where the Lord of Normandy was to enter the city. "His mother's a tanner's daughter," they laughed, "so let's scatter leather scraps everywhere." William appreciated the humor. He rode into the city and ordered half the residents' limbs cut off. When in 1066 William achieved some stability in Normandy, he began casting glances toward London, especially since that city was closer than Paris. The universe sent a sign for new conquests. Halley's Comet streaked across the earth. For a week, the night sky was cut by a great fireball, and William interpreted this mystical sign as a call to action. After a series of crushing battles on British soil, William became William the Conqueror. The bastard who spoke not a word of English founded the Norman dynasty that ruled England for decades. It's worth noting that in the 11th century, uncompromising hostility toward bastards hadn't fully crystallized. But in William's specific case, the elite was more irritated by the fact that he was half-blood. A ruler's legitimacy in medieval times and long after was crucial for common people. For instance, 4 centuries after William, during Joan of Arc's time, an urban legend circulated through Paris streets that the girl was of royal blood, which only increased her popularity among the people. Historians later proved this was a myth, but unusual blood gave a ruler additional power. If you're the king's child, even illegitimately born, you've somehow touched something magical. Such legitimacy is never superfluous, especially when leading an army to certain death. The full force of belief in bastard sinfulness unfolded closer to the 13th century. Before then, the church was more irritated by illegal marriages. But then various doctrines appeared, stating plainly that bastards were walking sins, and a persistent stigma against them emerged. Stigma, an elegant name for a brand or label. The humiliating attitudes that bastards experienced resulted from stigmatization. The word comes from Greek, originally meaning tattoos branded onto slaves and criminals. The patriarch of this scientific theme was legendary sociologist Émile Durkheim. How did he define stigma? Imagine a perfect monastery of saints. Any transgression that would seem insignificant to an ordinary person would be unforgivable to them. I won't ask you to imagine how monasteries work in our time. Not everyone would succeed. Let's imagine you arrived at a gala season premiere at the Bolshoi Theater wearing an Air Jordan tracksuit. On the street, people would treat you neutrally. There are hundreds of thousands of streetwear enthusiasts. But at the Bolshoi, among women in evening gowns, you're doomed to stigma. Humans love dividing into categories, us versus them. This is conditioned by the very nature of human evolution. Stereotypes exist for this purpose, to define signs of ours and theirs. Stigma serves the same function. Most people probably learned how bastard stigma works from Game of Thrones. In that fictional universe, bastards face endless discrimination. They receive surnames based on birthplace, society despises and condemns them. And if a bastard is raised alongside other children, that family is viewed as abnormal. Why were illegitimate children considered bad in medieval times, which undoubtedly inspired Game of Thrones creators? First reason, so it's written in the Bible. Religion became the foundation for countless laws adopted over centuries in various Christian countries. But as we'll see, the Bible is the Bible, but even it didn't stop extramarital relations in many places. The second reason sounds more familiar to modern ears. Producing bastards was economically disadvantageous. Poor families could barely feed themselves. What if the family head decided to father heirs on the side? Despite catastrophic child mortality rates, infanticide of bastards wasn't condemned everywhere. In some English regions in the 19th century, it was even considered honorable. But time passed and bastard stigma evolved. From the Middle Ages, let's journey to the Renaissance. Ser Piero was an ordinary notary in Italian Tuscany. He was engaged to a girl from a wealthy family, arranged marriage naturally. After work, he would visit his hometown to spend time with family. During one such visit, he met a very beautiful peasant woman named Caterina. Her family was poor, but he couldn't resist her beauty. A year later, in the town of Vinci near Florence, a bastard was born. They named him Leonardo. Importantly, his father's family didn't disown the peasant woman's child. They gave money, found her a husband, and sent her away with God's blessing in her newborn. What kind of bastard is this when it comes to a promising legal career? But the peasant woman didn't stop at one child. She bore her new husband almost one every year, leaving no time or money for Leonardo. The boy was left to himself and eventually went to live with his grandfather. The absence of parental control played into young Leonardo's hands. A teenager's dream came true. Do whatever you want. Absolute freedom from parental expectations that know exactly who you should be and whom you should marry. Leonardo the bastard, or child of nature as they said then, truly loved the surrounding world and sought to understand how it worked. Had Leonardo not been a bastard, his family would likely have pressured him heavily. He would have followed his father's footsteps, spending days in a notary office. Leonardo's love of nature shaped his worldview. Far more fascinating to study the world around you than blindly believe in university truths. In universities of that time, such views wouldn't have led anywhere good. In fairness, Leonardo couldn't have entered any prestigious university anyway. Bastards simply weren't accepted. But young Leonardo's reputation suffered even more from stories about his relationships with men. We're in 15th century Italy, controlled by the Medici family. To keep the population compliant, they used a painfully familiar tactic: denunciations. Any city resident could write an accusation and drop it into special truth holes, boxes placed throughout the city. Homosexuality was naturally illegal, and someone wrote a denunciation about Leonardo, claiming he was involved with a man. Bastard status only worsened the situation, but no ironclad proof of this relationship was found, neither then nor by historians since. Facts don't exist, but reputation suffered. Worst of all, Leonardo's father took this story badly. If he had previously partially funded his son's creativity, after the scandal, he cut all ties with him. Leonardo was left penniless. The theme of illegitimate birth ran through all his work. Take Lady with an Ermine. Da Vinci's model in this painting wore poor people's clothing. He wanted to show she belonged to lower social classes. In her hands, she holds an ermine, animals considered to never soil themselves, symbols of purity. Notice how large the animal is. Leonardo wanted to emphasize purity. Why? There's a theory that when the painting was created, the poor girl was carrying the child of local nobleman Sforza, member of the Order of the Ermine. Da Vinci encrypted a clear protest against the bastard's mark in this painting. He wanted to convey that even an illegitimate child isn't dirt, isn't a stain on the mother's reputation, isn't sin, but rather purity. Bastard status didn't prevent Leonardo from achieving status as perhaps the most genius human who ever lived on Earth. Scuba gear, parachute, tank prototype. What didn't he sketch and invent? And between these achievements, he casually painted the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. It must be said that in Renaissance, Italy, the bastard label was perceived ambiguously. Local traditions played even a greater role than the Bible. Taking an illegitimate child into the family was shameful, but not a mortal sin. Meanwhile, in other corners of Europe, such a family would at best be simply ostracized. Bastard status stayed with a person for life. As with Leonardo, such a person couldn't receive prestigious education, but social status and actions were more important to Florentines of that time, and not only to them. The first northern colonies in America were mainly British, and initially rather dubious characters went there, first to earn money, and second to start a new life. Your past was reset. You bore no obligations. Perfect soil for denying yourself nothing, including sexual relations. In America, it often happened that biological fathers didn't want to acknowledge children, requiring court proceedings, exactly like today's entertainment TV shows. The difference was that DNA tests didn't exist then. Initially, they expected mothers to reveal the real father's name themselves. The logic was astounding. She's the mother, so she definitely knows. This principle was called truth-based evidence. Eventually, Americans realized they should base court decisions on real evidence. What awaited you if an American court convicted you of having a child outside marriage? 40 pounds fine, about 480,000 rubles in today's money, and 15 lash strikes. They beat the bastard's mother and also banned her from future marriage. Every time 8-year-old Alexander Hamilton, future founding father of the USA, went outside, he tried to avoid being seen. No one wanted to communicate with him, let alone play or help. Adults averted their eyes, whether from pity or contempt. Yet he was neatly dressed, groomed, well-mannered. The issue was different. Hamilton's parents never married. In documents, he was recorded as an obscene child. Such children couldn't attend ordinary American schools, just like in many European countries. Hamilton's mother taught him to read and write herself. About his mother's biography, her husband regularly beat her. After several years, she fled, leading to divorce. The court banned Hamilton's mother from remarrying or having children. These requirements naturally didn't apply to the father. Hamilton barely survived his parents' divorce when his mother died of yellow fever. For some time, he and his brother lived on the streets. But his spirited character brought him to New York, where he found work as an assistant to a local businessman. Hamilton was ambitious beyond his years. At 15, he wrote that he was ready to sacrifice his life rather than die an ordinary clerk. He understood that bastard status would clip his wings. He might not even achieve ordinary clerk status. Therefore, he hid his origins his entire life. But the universe heard his plea. After a terrible, destructive tornado in his hometown, he wrote a newspaper column urging wealthy residents to donate money to help those who suffered. The letter so touched readers' souls that they managed to collect money for his education. Then began the Boston Tea Party, acquaintance with political elites, friendship with Washington, the American Constitution, the War of Independence. After the Revolution, Hamilton laid the foundation for America's mighty financial system and oversaw army armament. He was an ardent Federalist, advocating for big government and equally big taxes. Though he hid his past as much as possible, opponents struck where it hurt. Republicans began spreading rumors that Hamilton was, apparently, illegitimately born. But by then, he was too respected for this to strongly affect his career. The Founding Fathers' reputation was stronger than bastard stigma. Here's an interesting fact. Hamilton, having become a great man, personally promoted a law allowing Americans to divorce only if adultery was officially confirmed. The cheating spouse lost the right to remarry. The irony is that Hamilton himself was later caught cheating. These three vivid biographies would be impossible to live in our time for many reasons. Over the past century and a half, history has thoroughly ground up many stereotypes, attitudes, stigmas. Today, you won't be called privileged for having a mobile phone. No one will judge you for entering a nightclub without an expensive jacket. Old stigmas disappeared, but new ones emerged. Once, people feared leaving their caves. Then, they feared traveling beyond their villages. But with urban development and industrial growth, their social circles expanded dramatically. New labels appeared to help people navigate this life. Stigmas were, are, and will be an inevitable property of human relationships. What killed bastard stigma? The most accurate answer: the 20th century. Throughout the past century, the church gradually lost its influence on people's lives. Revolutions played their role, but mainly, states became deeply involved in ideological struggle. New authorities emerged to listen to, new dogmas to follow. It became far more important whether you were for reds or whites, for capitalism or communism. Attitudes toward marriage and family institutions became much calmer. Traditional views changed dramatically because new divisions and conflicts appeared in society. For England, which William the Bastard conquered, the endpoint was the Family Law Reform Act of 1987. Since then, all distinctions between children born in and out of wedlock disappeared in Britain. If bastards comprised about 6% at the century's beginning, by its end, their numbers grew to nearly 20%. Now, by some estimates, every second child born in Britain is born outside marriage. In the USA, the country that emerged partly thanks to Alexander Hamilton, along with the struggle for black rights, bastards remembered their rights too. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court ruled that most laws restricting illegitimate children's rights were illegal. Italy, whose cultural icon became Leonardo da Vinci, lagged somewhat behind others in this regard. They conducted their reform only in 1975, removing only the difference between so-called natural children and bastards. Full equality was established only in the 21st century. And that's the story. The ancient mark of shame dissolved into history's river, leaving behind only faint echoes in dusty legal texts and forgotten prejudices. What once determined a life's entire trajectory now barely registers as a footnote in birth records. Perhaps this teaches us something about the fluid nature of shame itself, how what one era considers unforgivable, another treats with indifference. The bastards didn't disappear. The world simply stopped caring about the circumstances of their birth, turning instead to judge them by their actions, their character, their contributions to the human story. In the end, the greatest bastards of history achieved what legitimacy alone never could. They proved that worth comes not from the circumstances of our arrival, but from what we choose to do once we're here.